Hi, it's Oz at kctvmedia.com, and I've been sharing and recording a few small quick testimonies for people, and this is another one which I hope will give you some idea of how God works today. I believe in miracles and supernatural and signs, and there are two particular testimonies that happened in May back in '97 when I you could say, looking after a small football team, and we had a six-a-side tournament that happened in Bristol, and most of the lads, to be fair, didn't have fathers. You're looking at one-parent families. I think there was only 3 lads that had fathers, and but the rest were from one-parent families. So you can imagine the stresses and strains in their own life. And I'm not going to say that I was looked upon as a father figure, but I had to have help from other fathers to help me. But we managed to get to this tournament on this beautiful May day in on the north side of Bristol, and I marched over to the tent which you've got to sign in, and I had 9 players, and unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, 2 of the fathers couldn't turn up. So my other friend, a guy from who now lives down in Portsmouth, Andy Rice, he came with me, and he was on kind of patrol in the back of the van because I was driving the transit, so it was all very stressful, I can tell you. And these are under 12 lads with all the hormones racing around, all the excitement and everything else, and it's a beautiful sunny day. But it had been raining through the night and the ground was muddy. So, but anyway, the guy that I went to see in the tent said, "Thanks for coming down. We paid the money that we have to pay in," and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you can only play 8 players in this tournament." And he said, "You got 9 players." I've counted 9. So I said, "Oh, look, I tell you what, don't tell me we can't play." He said, "No, you can play, but you're going to have to drop one of the lads. So from a legal point of view, you can only play 8. So I looked at Andy, and he obviously smiled. He said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, look, why don't we do this? Let's play the first 4 games. Okay, I don't think we're going to win a game because these lads mean well, but they're not team players yet. They're all individuals." And he said, "Yeah, I understand what you're saying." He said, "So basically play the first round and then you're scrubbed." I said, "Yeah, at least they get 4 games to play in." He said, "Okay." And that's what we did. So I turned around, picked up all the stuff that we had to pick up, the water, the footballs, the kit, and my son then came to me and said, "Dad, where are we going to get changed? We've got 10 minutes and then we've got our first game." Now, as I looked up the slope, we were playing on the top pitch, so at least it would have been drained. But of course I realised the importance of trying to get young kids dressed and into their kit quickly without too much mucking about. So I, with my left hand, pointed to 3 wooden benches that were some distance away, probably a good 300 yards away. And I said, "Look, go to the middle bench, because on the middle bench it will have etched in a penknife, 'Christ has arisen.'" And there was a silence when I said that, of course, because that was a prophetic moment. Andy looked at me and he said, "Was that wise?" And I nervously laughed, and I said, "Look, we just got to get on top of that hill so the lads can play football. That's all I'm concerned about." But he said, "Do you know what you've said?" I said, "Yes, I know what I've said." So the rest of the team all ran up to this middle bench, and of course as Andy and I approached the seat, there was some silence, and that was amazing to start with, because young lads don't have silence. It's just shouting and arguing and stuff like that. So as we came towards the bench, there was this silence, and there was one particular guy called Troy, who was probably individually the best football player in the whole team. And he looks at me, and the sweat was pouring off my head. I was saturated. The sun was down. I had wearing 2 coats. And he said, in a very low and demonic voice, "How did you know that was on the bench? What's written there? Christ has risen." I said it in faith. I have to tell you, that hushed them all up. And nobody was speaking out of turn. Even my son looked at me, and I just put my hands up in the air. I said, I just said it. Anyway, the game took place. They played the 4 games. They didn't win a game. They drew 2-0 and lost 2. But I shall never forget that day. And that day was the start of a number of things happening. Unfortunately for my son, at school, he was picked upon by 3 of the guys that played in the team, and they used to beat him up on a Friday afternoon. I came to find this out several months later, and I had a phone call from the school because they wanted to know why Luke was being egged on by these guys. And in the end, after a chat that we had, Luke decided that he would take these 3 guys on, and he flattened them. And the school was telling me they didn't particularly like that idea, nor did I. But I thought, well, if somebody's going to be punched and kicked, sometimes you got to fight back. And I was reminded of some of the things in the Old Testament where armies were outnumbered. And, there are times in life when you have to fight back for your own sanity, let alone anything else. And that's where my son had got. He would never raise his fist, but on this particular occasion, he did. And I was called the freak. I wonder why. But you see, that whole episode has, I could say, done wonders for my son, because he realised he was, in a way, alone for a time, until one day the perpetrator, a guy called Richard, and his family came knocking on our door because they'd found out what Richard and 2 other guys had been doing to my son over a period of 18 months. And she said, Richard's mother said, "We'd like Luke to come on holiday with us." I think more or less almost free. I think there was some money that he had to provide, but most of it was all paid for. And I must admit, when I found that out, I thought, well, God works in mysterious ways. So, friends, God is working today. And in a second, if I've got time, I shall do another little recording about what happened to a friend of mine called Mike. And I shall do that, I think, once I've had a cup of tea, and I shall record something else for you. Bye for now.